What's up, movie lovers? Thanks for clicking on my channel. So Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim is an animated film depicting what is essentially a civil war taking place in Rohan about 200 years before the events of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. It's distributed by New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers. It's produced by Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson, and it even has a lot of the same score that Howard Shore first composed for the original trilogy. All that is to say is that this is clearly connected to the film series, even though it's telling a completely different story. And since the Lord of the Rings trilogy is still one of my favorite films of all time, probably my favorite film series ever made, and it is what got me into film, a large part of what got me into fantasy, I was kind of cautiously optimistic going into this movie. That sense of optimism was a little bit tempered by some concerns I had going into this film. The biggest being that I was a little nervous about whether this was going to be an actual movie and an actual story that someone had a passion for and they wanted to be told, or if it was just something that was going to have the Lord of the Rings slapped onto it and it's like, oh yeah, they'll come buy it because it has Lord of the Rings on it. As much as I love Tolkien and as much as I love that original trilogy, you can't just slap Lord of the Rings onto something and expect me to like it. It has to actually be a good movie in its own right, and I'm happy to say that the Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, I think is a really solid movie just in and of itself. So starting off, the animation in this movie is pretty good and at times absolutely beautiful and breathtaking. There are some times in the movie where it seems a bit wonky, and I think that mainly has to do with the blending of 2D animation with 3D animation. Maybe they needed a little bit more time to devote on certain scenes. It never took me out of the movie completely, but there are some times where I'm watching the horses kind of gallop and I'm like, wait, something's not landing here. But that's a very minor gripe. Overall, the animation looks wonderful. Speaking of horses, I like how this movie leans into the fact that the Rohirrim are basically Vikings on horses instead of ships. The characters in this movie are trying to be good by the standards of the culture they live in, not by the standards of our culture, which I appreciate. And with that in mind, the character of Helm is pretty interesting because in a lot of ways he's not a likable person, but you can see why he's a capable ruler in this world. And there's a couple moments where he kind of lets the facade crack a little bit and you see that, oh yeah, he does actually have good intentions. He's just maybe not always going about it in a way that is smart or good by our standards. And the main character for this film is Hera, and I have to say that she is an incredibly likable protagonist. She might not be the most original character, but it's still done very well. At its core, the movie really is about her and her relationship with her father, Helm, who is the king. I also really like when she puts herself out there and she's in dangerous situations. She's never doing it for her own ego, she's doing it to help others, and it's not that she wants to do it, it's just that she looks at the alternative and it's, these people are going to suffer if I don't step up and do it. There's no one else around. Okay, I guess it's up to me. And since you have a main character filled with self-doubt, I think that opens the door to talk about something else this movie does very well, which is moral ambiguity. Don't get me wrong, there is a villain in the movie, but you still have people on different sides of this war who have their own boundaries for what they want to do and what lines they won't cross. And there's also parallels in this movie that I really enjoy. There's parallels between Helm and Hera. Hera learns from her father. And there's also parallels between Hera and Wolf, the main antagonist. While he is very clearly the bad guy in this film and his actions are not justified, he does have a real reason to be very pissed off at Helm. And what I like about his character too is that he has moments where it seems like he's experiencing self-doubt and he's questioning whether or not what he's doing is right, but then his anger and his vindictiveness and his desire to get revenge kind of supersede those feelings of self-doubt. And the script toys with our expectations at times where you'll have this Lord of the Rings style moment, this very heroic, very over-the-top moment, and then reality check right after. And that's something else that I liked about this movie. It goes there. It has a few moments where you're like, wow, this is really pushing what you can get away with in PG-13, which reminds me of the original trilogy. Go rewatch the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it's just like, wow, decapitations left and right, and this is still somehow PG-13, okay. I also like how this movie has a bit more realism in there. Like, it shows sieges suck. If there's a siege in a war, you kind of just sit around and it's boring and you're freezing cold and there's nothing fun about that. Which once again reminds me a lot of Tolkien, where in The Hobbit he's just like, yeah, no, going on adventures kind of sucks. And something else about this movie that I thought was very Tolkien-esque was its sense of loss and the bittersweet moments it has in it. And one of the themes that this movie touches on that I really enjoyed is the idea that people are at their best not when they're trying to be brave for their own ego, but when they're trying to be brave for other people. Another moment in this movie is when a certain character, well, I shouldn't say character, more like a certain creature makes an appearance, and it reminded me of that scene in Rogue One where you see Darth Vader from a completely different perspective. What I mean to say by that is that it was absolutely horrifying, and my jaw was on the floor when I saw it. I was like, oh no, this is scary. There's no wizards around to save us from this thing. Oh, hey buddy. Hey buddy. Oh, hi buddy. I love you. Yeah, I love you too. Oh. Okay, I think Jojo has had enough. I think Jojo, you want to say hi, Jojo? Oh, I love you. You're a good boy. I know. Okay. Hi. Okay. And as much as I enjoyed this movie, there are certain flaws. One of those being that the animation at times might not be to everyone's liking. That one didn't bother me at all, but there are two flaws in this movie that did kind of bother me a bit. One being, I wish it was longer. I wish it was 15 to 20 minutes longer so we could have been in this world more and we could have had more character moments or more time to explore the themes that the movie touches on. The other one that bothered me, but I still appreciate it, but I think it makes the movie weaker as a whole, is some of the fan service. The fan service is not that egregious and it is really designed for super fans, but there was one time where I heard a line in the movie and I was like, oh, this makes complete sense for this person to say this in this context, but that is a line that I recognize from the original trilogy. And then it happened again, and again, and again, and it always made sense in the context, but still, when I hear someone say, I thought I lost you, it just makes me think of one thing. Again, this doesn't sink in the movie, it still stands on its own and it's still very good, but that is something that my analytical mind is like, maybe just have a little bit less of that. And that kind of goes into something else I'm a little concerned about. Not about this film in particular, because I really liked it, but just about where it seems like they want to take the Lord of the Rings property going forward. It really does seem as though they're trying to set up for a Marvel Cinematic Universe style thing, and I really hope they don't. But that's all for the future. It hasn't been written yet, so as for right now, I think that Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim was a fantastic film, and for me, I'm going to say it's an A-tier movie. It has a great voice cast, it has a very likable main character, it touches on themes that feel very Tolkien-esque, and the movie certainly has its share of heartfelt moments and times where you're like, oh, the movie is actually going to go there. Okay, wasn't expecting it, but I like it. It's not quite up there in the S tier like the original trilogy is for me. Maybe nothing ever will be, but it is a good movie and it is certainly much, much better than pretty much anything set in Middle-earth that we've gotten since Return of the King. I mean, the first Hobbit film isn't terrible, but I like this one better, to be honest. Sorry, Martin Freeman, you were amazing as Bilbo. So those are my thoughts on The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, but enough about what I think. Have you seen this movie, and if you did, what did you think of it? What do you think is the best Lord of the Rings property we've gotten since Return of the King? And have you read the works of Joe Abercrombie? Let me know if you have. Say one thing for Joe Abercrombie. That first trilogy is incredible. And if this is your first video you've seen of me and you like movies and music, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, all that YouTube stuff. If you like any of these bands back here, you probably find a lot on my channel that you'll enjoy. There's probably a video popping up around here you might also enjoy. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you at the next video.